What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode. I'm Swiper Cam, and welcome to my channel. Now, primarily, this is a NBA, NFL channel, usually covers sports, but there is a very important topic that we need to discuss. I was not planning on making this video several days ago, but after sitting down, I've been writing on Twitter a lot the last couple of days. It's very important for us to understand some of the dynamics of this Maria Taylor and Rachel Nichols situation. On Sunday, July 4th, Independence Day here in America, an article came out with the New York Times specifying that when Rachel Nichols was alone in her hotel room, she was speaking to the representative who was a white man of LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and other people. And she was speaking to this representative, and she was referencing a situation with ESPN and the higher-ups in which they were, in her mind, trying to push Maria Taylor into a position that was somehow interlapping with Rachel Nichols' territory. And what happened is that she made a comment essentially saying that just because you have a crappy record, ESPN, with diversity doesn't mean you need to push her into my stuff, keep her away from my stuff. And she, not subtly, essentially said that Maria Taylor is a diversity hire in the conversation. This happened during the bubble in 2020 in the NBA playoffs. And so there's so many things that have happened since then, since the article came out. We come to find out that Maria Taylor has not had a conversation with Rachel Nichols since this happened. She has been reached out to by Rachel Nichols in the form of texts and calls, but she has decided that it's not within her best interest nor within her peace as an individual, as a human, as a black woman, that she needed to have a conversation with Rachel, especially considering what was said about her. The only reason that Maria found out was because Kayla Johnson, I believe, who works in social media at ESPN at the time, she had the feed from the conversation with Rachel Nichols. She then shared that, and Maria Taylor then shared it with HR. And ESPN, as ESPN does, they decided that they wanted to suspend Kayla Johnson, and she no longer worked with the company, but she was suspended for 2 weeks without pay. So there's a lot of different things that are at work. And so with all this happening on social media, with all this happening in the journalism world, one of the things that followed up after that was ESPN, as of today, July 6th, decided that Rachel Nichols was no longer going to be working the sidelines during the NBA Finals. You see, Maria Taylor is already host of NBA Countdown with Jalen Rhodes and Jay Williams and other people. And so when this happened, we had expected there's going to be some kind of a pitfall because of it. And I know there's a lot of conversations around why exactly is it such a big deal that Rachel Nichols made these comments about Maria Taylor, but I want to at least try to specify a couple of them. The first one is that there is, especially in America, there is such a thing as a power dynamic between black people and white people. Because of the racism and history in this country, black people have not been afforded the opportunities that most white people have, especially in spaces of being an analyst or a journalist in the sports world. Even though we make up 70% of the NBA, 70% of the NFL, the two most popular sports in America or in the United States, we don't make up anywhere near that percentage in the analyst world, in the journalist world. And so with Maria Taylor, she is an exceptional talent. She worked for the SEC Network, has worked for ESPN for a number of years. Sideline reporter in the NCAA. She had that famous interview with Nick Saban at one point in time. Maria Taylor worked all the way up, became the host of NBA Countdown. She has a Heisman vote and has an NBA MVP vote. And for the first team, second, third team All-NBA, Defensive Player of the Year, all that stuff. She has a lot of accreditation now at this point in time in her career. She's only 34, so she has a long way to go. It's only getting better. She is a former volleyball player at University of Georgia. She played basketball as well. I mean, just an exceptional talent all around. And ESPN has been pushing her forward, especially over the last several years with the fallout. If you don't remember, Jamel Hill and both Michael Smith were essentially let go from ESPN over comments they had made about Trump, or even the political comments that they were making on their show, which wasn't a lot, but because of where the country was at the time with the Donald Trump presidency, conservatives had a very large voice. And there were many, especially white people, that did not like the fact that these two African Americans were talking about race and politics on their show, a sports show. And so because of that conservative pushback, they decided to fire and or let go Jamil Hill and Michael Smith. And so they were really the first two to suffer the axe. But as time went on, and as 2016, Philando Castile's murder, and Alton Sterling and Terrence Crutcher, and then, the Charlottesville incident in 2017, ESPN started responding because they needed more black voices to be able to speak to the issues that this country is facing. And on top of that, they needed a broadcasting team and analysts and journalists that are more reflective of the communities they're supposed to be serving, which again, if you know anything about this channel, one of the reasons I started this channel was because we have so many people covering the NBA and the NFL, but yet we don't have a lot of black people or people of color covering the NBA and NFL. And a lot of that has to do with opportunity. A lot of that has to do with access. A lot of that is that, when you do play sports like myself, you're not exactly put in a position to be able to go down that pathway. So with Rachel Nichols, when she made those comments about Maria Taylor, the problem is that the system of ESPN is what is most toxic. The system of ESPN has this Highlander mentality of that there only can be one, essentially. One prominent female voice, one prominent black voice, one prominent black male, black female voice. And with this situation, ESPN essentially created a toxic work environment in which Maria Taylor and Rachel Nichols, at least in Rachel's understanding, were pitted against each other. They're fighting for airtime. Michelle Beadle used to be on ESPN, is no longer with ESPN. She was another amazing talent that they had to let go of. ESPN has a bad habit pitting women against each other in this workforce, competing for airtime, competing for interviews, and all these other things. And ESPN was trying to answer an issue and solve a problem of having a lack of diversity on their team. And so they're pushing Maria Taylor, who is great in her own right. But in Rachel's mind, they were pushing her to solve a diversity question in which Rachel felt ESPN and now Maria Taylor was impeding on her territory as a journalist and as an analyst. And so when she made the comments about the fact that ESPN has a crappy history with diversity and now they're pushing up on her territory, she made it sound as if Maria Taylor was only being hired because she was black. And that's deeply problematic considering how talented she already is. But once again, that is not language that black people are not accustomed to. We have been hearing for decades in corporate spaces and organizations and businesses that the only reason we are there is because we are black. But one of the things that people miss is that the reason that there are quotas in the first place in organizations and businesses is because they did not hire black people for the longest, or they didn't have enough black people for the longest. So the people that own ESPN, the CEO of ESPN, these are mostly white people. And a lot of these are very conservative whites that suffer from the same issues of white supremacy and the same issues of white bias and racial bias and implicit bias as many of the other people that have existed before them. So they don't know how to solve these problems. And so now they're trying to fix a problem they created by putting this black woman front and center, even though she's talented enough, but essentially to take over the territory, as Rachel thought, that she already had. And so Rachel, who has been a benefactor of nepotism herself, from her family relationships, from being a white woman in a mostly white space, one of the things that people miss out on is the number one benefactor of affirmative action in America are white women. Because when there was essentially a affirmative action was put in place, it was to see that, hey, you know what? We have too many white men dominating these spaces. We need to make this place more diverse. Well, the number one benefactor of that action, of affirmative action, is white women, because you need to have someone who is not like you in power. And so if it's white males who are in power, the person that are going to be mostly closely associated with them are white women. So her, again, even though she suffered oppression and injustice in her own right as a woman, she still is closely connected to the top of the top on the racial hierarchy with white men. And so when she made that comment to another white man about Maria Taylor, it was so deeply demeaning, disrespectful, and it also was condescending to suggest that the fact that Maria Taylor was only getting there not because of her own merit, her own skill, her own work, but because she was black, and that was the reason. And when that comment was made, she weaponized her whiteness and she weaponized Maria Taylor's blackness as a way of discrediting Maria Taylor, even if she didn't mean to do so. That's what happened. And so the fallout now is that literally the black women of ESPN have been a long time been saying that there is an issue with diversity and representation, and their voices are not heard at ESPN. Think about all the talented black women that have come and go from ESPN over the last 7 years or so. You got Jamel Hill. You have Carrie Champion, excellent mediator that used to be with First Take before Molly Karam Rose. You also have Jacina Anderson, who just left last year, who was NFL Live, fantasy football, all of that stuff was excellent. And then on top of that, now you're looking at a situation where Maria Taylor, where her contract is coming up. Is she going to stay or is she going to go? ESPN doesn't have a great track record with the black women that used to work there. And it's not just speculation. They have shared publicly. They did not have good experiences at ESPN. So there's a very close-knit group of black people with ESPN that are very supportive of one another. So when Kayla Johnson heard through the grapevine that these comments were made from Rachel Nichols about her friend and another black woman and a colleague, she shared it with her, and she paid the price for getting suspended for it. But now what's happened is with Rachel Nichols, instead of ESPN addressing the issue as they should, they put Rachel Nichols on television yesterday on Monday, July 5th, and let her do a 30-second apology, not apologizing for what she did, but apologizing for how she made Maria Taylor feel, which again doesn't acknowledge how she weaponized her race against Maria Taylor, how she weaponized language of diversity, which undermines Maria Taylor's credibility and her ability and skill. She didn't acknowledge any of that. All she said was, "I'm sorry for how I made Maria Taylor feel," and that's problematic. That doesn't actually meet to the core of the issue of why what she did is so hurtful. And then on top of that, Kendrick Perkins, former NBA athlete, black man, Richard Jeffries, former NBA athlete, black man, they were put to be the front faces and front and center to be character witnesses for Rachel Nichols to say that, hey, I haven't had that experience with her. I don't believe that she's racist. Now, yeah, they acknowledged that they liked Maria Taylor. They acknowledged that what Rachel did was a little bit problematic, but they spent more time talking and apologizing for something they didn't do than Rachel did in owning her own dirt. So ESPN, they allowed these two black men to be scapegoats essentially for what Rachel Nichols needs to be dealing with herself. And now we are here even further down the road, kicking a can down the road when this thing should have been addressed. And it has not been addressed. So the fallout today is that Malika Andrews will now be replacing Rachel Nichols on the sideline reporter during the NBA Finals. You know what? That's something. But ESPN is going to have to go a lot further than where they're going right now. The fact is they have infrastructural issues that they must deal with because black people have had terrible experiences working with ESPN. And it's because of stuff like this. It's because white colleagues behind the scenes have made comments like this before and not had to face really any repercussions for it. The fact of the matter is that black people have had to deal with these comments made about them and to deal with their colleagues just merely apologizing for making them feel this way instead of actually apologizing for the issue and then correcting behavior. ESPN, this is not the first time this has happened. This is not the last time this will happen because ESPN has not yet dealt with the core of the issue with their institution, that white supremacy in terms of the ideology, in terms of the practices. Again, not the outright racism, calling people the N-word and all that stuff. That might happen. But what's happened is ESPN has created a culture where white women like Rachel Nichols get a pass, but black women like Jemele Hill, for calling out racism, calling out white supremacy, they don't get a pass. They get fired or reprimanded for it harshly. Kayla Johnson dealt with harshly. ESPN has a massive infrastructural problem that needs to be addressed. And they are the reason this happened in the first place. This happened because they pit two women up against each other instead of giving them their own territory and space to operate and be great on their own. And then Rachel Nichols, instead of just merely addressing that problem, she weaponized her whiteness, her privilege against this black woman in Maria Taylor. And Maria Taylor has not spoken to her since she found out that this happened. So again, this is not a small issue. This is not an isolated issue. Because you can go look at Jemele Hill's story, you can look at Jacina Anderson, you can go look at the other black women on ESPN. Most of them, if not all of them, have not come out to support Rachel Nichols. They've come out to support Maria Taylor because they have had similar experiences. So there's a lot of stuff to be addressed. This is a video that needs to be a lot longer. I could have a conversation with a group of people about this because it's really important. But y'all, this is a part of the reason I even made this channel. It's because we are not allowed to have these conversations within the corporations and within the environments that we work in. Unless you work in the black environment. And you're not going to have these issues. You're having other kinds of issues, but you're not having this issue. When you work in predominantly white spaces when you're black, you have an extreme limitation in what you are allowed to talk about issues you're allowed to resolve and conversations you're allowed to have. Because you don't have the ability, because you're not given the freedom to do it unless you're going to put your job at risk. Kendrick Perkins never should have been on that stage. And Kendrick Perkins should have done a lot better, but again, I'm not going to address that right now because there's some things that he said that are problematic, especially when you say that I know your heart, so I know you can't be racist. But again, that's not really the issue at hand. And then Kendrick Perkins, I addressed him on social media, and I said essentially that he needs to be caping, supporting the black women of ESPN. And when they ask him about Rachel Nichols, he needs to support these black women that work for that company. And he blocked me for that on Twitter because he didn't like that what I had to say, nor that I said he had a responsibility in making sure he was protecting those black women. So there's a lot to this, and it's really emotional right now. I can talk about this more, but what I wanted to do was at least put this video out to explain to some degree, in a very minute way. If you want to listen to more, you can go and look at Jamel Hill on Dan's podcast that they just did. That'd be a great resource for you to lean into. Dishes and Dimes is a podcast that you can go lean to with Sandy. Sandy had an open forum that she created on Twitter yesterday. A 3-hour conversation I participated in. You can go and be a part of that. Dishes and Dime podcast talks about this. So we can do more around this issue, man, but I needed to at least put it out there to help explain, especially for my international audience that may not be aware of why this is such a big deal. But anyway, you all, I got more videos coming up soon. I appreciate your patience. I'm still getting to 10,000 so we can go to Serbia. I have been swamped with work. I create content outside of this as well. So again, you all, this is Swipe a Cam. We're going to be back soon. I'll see y'all later.